Welcome to your online coffee break, where we discuss bite-sized topics that inspire, educate, and entertain. Here's your host, a software innovator, award-winning marketer, and astronomy and space buff, Chuck Fields.
Hello, thanks for joining me today for your online coffee break. Today I'd like to welcome to the show my special guest, Jonathan Ignatius Green. Jonathan is the director of Social Animals, a new documentary that examines the unique challenges and opportunities that social media presents to modern-day young people. The movie examines the lives of three teenagers, a daredevil photographer, an aspiring swimsuit model, and a Midwestern girl next door, and peeks into the digital and real worlds of today's image-focused teen, where followers, likes, and comments mark success and self-worth.
Online coffee break.
Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. Now, I love this. In your statement for Social Animals, you describe how in 1997, a man named Philip Kahn invented the modern camera phone, which revolutionized, of course, image sharing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we had the privilege to interview Philippe, and he was just an inventor and was coming up with he had already had hundreds of patents under his name. And he lives in Santa Cruz, was just kind of a tech innovator of that era. Mm-hmm. And he basically, what was revolutionary wasn't so much that he soldered a camera phone or a camera to a phone. It was more that he had built this back-end system, this server that the photo would immediately upload to the server and spit it out and share it with a bunch of your friends. So he kind of created the metaphor or the idea that would later become Instagram and certainly some of the main features of most social media platforms.
That's true. And I understand you actually have a short film on that you did. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we interviewed Philippe, and we were going to include it in the film, and then it just didn't quite fit with where the whole film was going once we got in editorial. But we had actually done this amazing kind of recreation of the events around the day that he put those pieces together. It happened to be the day that his daughter was born, and he's literally doing the soldering in the maternity ward of the hospital. And it's such a stranger than fiction kind of moment that we recreated the whole thing and kind of made a short film about it. And it was on National Geographic Short Film Showcase and a bunch of other places and some film festivals. So it's called The Birth of the Camera Phone. You can Google it. It'll come right up.
Excellent. Excellent. That's fantastic, Jonathan. Now let's talk about Social Animals. Amazing movie. I really enjoyed it. I think it covers such an important topic. And you described something called digital self-worth. I was wondering if you could just explain in your opinion, how would you define what digital self-worth is?
Yeah, I think that, it's not like the film is about, on its face, it's about teenagers, right? It's about teenagers and social media, specifically Instagram, mm-hmm. and kind of becoming, that's when those adolescent years is when you really shape yourself or become aware of who you are and start to define those things in more concrete ways. And certainly all the things that teenagers are going through in high school are not anything new for the most part, right? Where there's popularity that people are going through. They want their friends to notice them and like them and all those kinds of things. Now, the only thing that's really new is that now we're doing it digitally. And I think the idea of the kind of digital self is really a new thing, because it's not just, it is at the same time an extension of the self, but mm-hmm. it's also, because it's on all the time, it's kind of this other proxy that we've never really had before. And I think people are able to also kind of treat themselves like a commodity and tracking how popular they are by how many likes and followers and all those things. And those certainly weigh into the psychology of the development of teenagers and even adults.
Well, see, I love that. And I love how the movie, it basically takes three specific teenagers, different teenagers, Kailyn, Humza, and Emma, and traces their totally sort of different reactions to how they use Instagram to what they get out of it. I'm just wondering, how did they select these three in particular?
Well, we had gone through this long process of finding the film we wanted to make. And it wasn't without a lot of trial and error. we'd actually started making kind of a different version of the film with totally different characters. And the only one that we ended up keeping in the final version of the film that you've seen is the Humza character. And after we interviewed actually Philip Kahn, we were like, I think the most interesting thing is to talk about this younger generation that's literally people that have been born. Humza was born in 1997, the same year that the camera phone was invented. Mm-hmm. Let's focus our narrative on young people that have only been born since this has been out, since the rapid capturing and sharing of images is literally standard equipment for navigating your life and your social sphere. And so we were kind of looking for people that the platform Instagram had played a large role in one way or another, good and bad, and everything in between. And so we without getting into all the kind of arduous details of how we found these three people, I think we were just looking for these as diverse a group as possible. We interviewed like 50 teenagers, and many of those interviews actually ended up in the film as well, to kind of sprinkle in, many more points of view.
See, I love that too. I thought that was very well done. Now, I don't want to obviously give away the movie, but I'd love to just touch base on these particular individuals, just on the high surface. Let's talk about Kailyn first. It sort of documents how she's going to surpass, 500,000 followers. Can you tell us a little bit more about her?
Yeah, I mean, when we started filming with her, she was 14 years old, almost 15, and was already nudging up in the high 400,000s arena of followers. And she had been, she'd done some child acting. Was very successful in dance competitions, and honestly, she's very affluent. She's very privileged. Her father's a very successful business person. And so she kind of lives this idealized American dream life of being rich and pretty and talented. And so I think that she really became this kind of symbol of that. And some people have an opinion of somebody like that, like a miniature Kardashian or something, that she's going to be this terrible person. And she actually is this very sweet person. And she's really, as we were looking at it, the thing that was interesting is that she's kind of becoming a woman while she's becoming a public figure, becoming a brand. Yes. And how does that work? And are those two things ever in tension, or how do they inform each other? So that's the Kailyn character, and she's an interesting, she's got an interesting story.
Yes, she is. Now let's go on to Humza. You mentioned him a little bit. Now I'm a photographer at heart, and I just love where he comes from, how he takes these amazing photos. Can you tell us a little bit more about how he uses Instagram?
Yeah, I mean, Humza is such a great story because he grew up in the opposite circumstance of Kailyn. He came from a very underprivileged environment. The projects in Queens, not a strong father figure in his life, and really was raised mostly by his grandmother. He and his brother were, and the model of growing up for him was that most of the kids that he saw, especially the guys, never left those 4 blocks, and kind of he thought he'd be on this path to stay in that very tight knit area and probably become a drug dealer or maybe get incarcerated. And that was the models of what he saw. And then he found photography, and because Instagram and social media kind of democratized audience, he was able to start expressing himself through photography and immediately kind of get the responses of people like we all do. And it really blossomed into effectively him finding his artistic voice and certainly risking his life in many cases to get the perfect picture, and which got him a lot of attention and kind of set him on a totally different track than he would have been able to.
See, now that's amazing. Now, what I like too is you have 2 characters so far that they've actually used Instagram and achieved success through it. Then we have Emma. Tell us a little bit more about Emma.
Well, we wanted to balance out kind of our, I guess, exceptionalism stories of teenagers that have grown these huge followings of hundreds of thousands of followers. We wanted a more kind of typical experience of an American teenager. And also we had LA and New York. We're like, well, we need something in middle America that kind of epitomizes just a more average experience. And so Emma was gracious enough to share her story with us, and she had, without giving too much away, she'd experienced some bullying on Instagram and other social media platforms, and a couple different episodes that had dramatically affected her journey in also becoming a young woman. And one of the more traumatic events that happened only a few months before we filmed with her, but she had the kind of wherewithal, the maturity to an ability to share with us very candidly how she had weathered that storm, and it's super impactful. And I think, the goal with all three characters was to neither say like, oh, this character it's good, and this character it's good, and this character it's bad, but it's really to show, Humza's success didn't come without a cost, and same with
Right.
Kailyn's, and Emma's challenges were not without the high points or the good things. And so the goal of the whole film was to kind of show how complicated and nuanced the role of social media is for these characters, and more broadly for teenagers, rather than just to say it's all good or all bad or something like that.
Yeah, it's very well done. Now, Jonathan, let me ask you this: from your standpoint, what surprised you the most during filming? What did you learn from it that you were caught off guard by, or to surprise yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely read a number of books and talked to a lot of people going into the film, and kind of had like certain conceptions of what I would find interviewing teenagers on social media. And certainly it's in the news and people are writing articles about these kinds of things. I think the thing that surprised me the most wasn't like, oh, one person said something and I was like, whoa, that never heard that before, because I had heard a lot of it. Mm-hmm. It was more just in spending time with 30, 40 teenagers, interviewing a lot of them and hearing their accounts. It was honestly just how integrated all of these things kind of goes back to where we started, where in this conversation with like, this is so integrated into their lives. It's not compartmentalized. It's not, oh, this is my social media self and this is my real self. Mm-hmm. It's all their real self. It's just expressing itself in different ways. And it's such a common thing they don't even think about. They don't think about, I mean, they're kind of manicuring how they present themselves on social media, so they think about it in that way, mm-hmm. but they never thought about not doing that. And it's just, it's really become like a second nature to kind of, and part of the just growing up experience, to have this technology and this tool be part of that journey.
Now, who's your target audience for this? Is it for teens, parents, both?
It's definitely both, and people that are neither,
mm-hmm.
just young adults, or I think anybody interested in kind of the social impact of technology and things like that. I think a more targeted thing would actually be those two you mentioned, teenagers and parents. Our goal with the film was to make, to tell a story that wouldn't hit you over the head with a message or anything like that, but be something that a parent could watch with a teen, or teen could watch with a parent, not feel like they're getting preached at, but rather could bring up a bunch of questions that they could have conversations about.
See, I love that, and I agree. I think it would open a dialogue in that case, because I was going to ask you, what do you want audiences to take away from social animals? And it sounds like just that fact of just having that open discussion and just kind of looking at it from a big picture perspective, thinking, how does this impact our lives? What are we doing? Positive, negative? How can we make this better for all of us?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I had a filmmaking mentor of mine who once said that like a good film helps you feel a question. And I love that it's not so much like you should think this or you should feel this way. It's like, hopefully by honestly depicting as best we could these people's stories and their struggles, people can feel some questions and think about some questions that maybe they hadn't exactly thought about before, and which hopefully stirs some reflection that's meaningful to them.
Excellent. Well, that kind of leads in, because I was going to ask you, as a film director, Jonathan, if I got this right, I understand this was your first documentary film debut. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. I've made lots of short documentaries and even some short scripted films, but this was my first long form, like feature film of any kind, specifically documentary.
See, what was the most challenging for you?
I mean, I think, the documentary, I actually studied screenwriting
mm-hmm.
in my graduate program. And so to actually go into documentary is like, wow, I didn't know you were going to do that.
Yeah.
In documentary, with all films, you kind of write the film 3 times. There's like, you make the film 3 times, the one you write, the one you shoot, and the one you edit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with documentary, those are kind of all meshed together, where you're actually rewriting it so much. And in the editing room is kind of the final draft of the script. You're kind of writing and editing at the same time. And I think with documentary, it's so much about, being honest with your subject and what you're doing, and try to have integrity in how you portray the truth of their story, but also like making it entertaining and making it interesting. And it just takes a lot of perseverance. It's not, we actually did, quick story, we actually had an edit. It was a very premature edit, but we were like, there's some festival deadlines, and one of them South by Southwest, and we sent this edit. We're like, well, we know it's not really ready, but we're going to send it anyway. And we got rejected from the festival. And then we worked on the film another 6 months, and then got a bunch more notes and did test screenings and listened to the feedback and kept working. And then the next year we submitted the film and it got into South by. Nice. And when we did our question and answer after our premiere at South by Southwest, the guy who was leading the question and answer, he said, I was on the program board. I saw the first version. I'm glad you stuck with it because the first version wasn't ready yet. And I think so much of documentary and really all filmmaking and art making is about that perseverance to like see it through till it's done.
That's a great lesson for us all. Now, I'm excited about just Social Animals, and just as your directorial debut on that, you've done such a fantastic job. What is next for you? What's coming up?
Well, we've actually, we're trying to use some of our momentum with this project and the exposure it's gotten in the festival thing and parlay that into new projects. And so we're actually developing a bunch of different stories, and a number of them that we've been more focused on of recent that are starting to get some traction are both true crime documentary projects that we're really excited about.
Excellent. Well, Jonathan, I'm excited about this, and just again want to congratulate you on Social Animals. I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure.
Online coffee break.
Well, I really enjoyed my conversation today with Jonathan. Hope you did too. If you'd like to learn more about his film, Social Animals, just go to their website, socialanimalsfilm.com. I want to thank Jonathan for joining us today. I want to thank you for joining us as well. If you'd like to comment on today's topic, just go to our website, onlinecoffeebreak.com, or call us at 317-862-4700. We'd also love it if you'd follow us on Instagram at onlinecoffeebreak. Also, be sure to share this episode or rate us on iTunes. Thank you so much for joining us today. See you next time. God bless.